Chestermere Historical Foundation acknowledges that this presentation is being delivered on the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, the Stoney Nakoda, and the home of the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Welcome, and thank you for attending this presentation. Today, we'll be exploring a long-forgotten chapter in Chestermere's history. The years leading up to the First World War marked Calgary and area's first great boom. This economic opportunity inspired local entrepreneurs to promote Chestermere as an up-and-coming commuter suburb and recreational destination. But how to transport people from Calgary out to the lake and back? The answer appeared to be an electric streetcar line. Let's step back for a moment and talk about the genesis of Chestermere Lake. As many will know, it was constructed as Reservoir Number 1 for CPR's massive irrigation project. The project's primary revenues were to come from the sale of land and the fees collected from farmers for irrigation water. But CPR recognized that they could add to their revenue stream by selling lots fronting the reservoir for recreational purposes. Even before the lake was filled in May 1906, the company was advertising summer resort lots on Chestermere's shores. The suggestion of a motorboat service to whisk passengers back and forth is puzzling, as it's uncertain how they planned to do that given the drop structures on the main canal between Calgary and Chestermere. Perhaps these structures hadn't been built yet, but they certainly existed by the early teens. Just draw your attention to the plan on the left-hand side, showing that CPR had lotted out everything south of present-day Merganser Drive on both sides of the lake. Between 1906 and 1911, Calgary's population grew by more than 3.5 times, and the demand for new housing outpaced supply as new residents poured into the city. Building permits skyrocketed, speculative land sales boomed, and promotional literature extolling Calgary's virtues abounded. Numerous plans for new subdivisions, both inside and outside Calgary's boundaries, were registered land titles. The rate of growth in that era completely outstripped anything seen since, even in a region notorious for boom and bust cycles. Calgary's first streetcars were delivered on July 3, 1909, and by the end of the month were running as far east as Cushing's factory, located near 15th Street Southeast, on the opposite side of the tracks from the Calgary Brewery. The system quickly became popular, and by 1910 it carried 250,000 fares per month. The expanding streetcar system allowed working people to live in moderately priced suburbs, further away from their places of employment. As a result, property that was located on or near an existing or proposed streetcar line was more desirable and sold at a premium. Even before Calgary's streetcar system began running, parties with interests at Chestermere began to lobby city officials for a line to the lake. CPR and others offered to donate a 2-acre parcel for, quote, park, entertainment, and auditorium purposes, if the line was extended to Chestermere. Their pitch pointed out that the lake was the only place convenient to Calgary where water sports could be enjoyed. As it happened, a competing offer of 30 acres had already been received from some Shaganappi landowners. In the end, Calgary declined to extend lines to either location. At this point, we meet a very interesting character. James Arlington McCullough, known as J.A., came to Calgary about 1907. He was born in Dundas County, Ontario, something he had in common with the McElroy brothers, Andrew Hodson, and Charlie Carlyle, who had previously settled in the Chestermere district. After his arrival in Calgary, J.A. operated a real estate agency in partnership with Alex McGillis. He became a part owner of property on the east side of the lake, just south of present-day Chestermere Boulevard, where he raised and trained harness horses. No doubt this was why he later founded the Chestermere Calgary Townsite and Development Company Limited. McCullough was the driving force in a venture to build an electric railway between Calgary and the lake. In these 1909 letters to the editor, he highlights Chestermere's benefits and mentions a planned clubhouse to be constructed at the cost of about $10,000. The building would contain a large club room, swimming bath, refreshment booth, and storage for 200 canoes. Altogether, one gets the impression of an energetic, ambitious entrepreneur and salesman, prone to hyperbole. Some might even say he was something of a visionary. This is a rendering of what the proposed clubhouse would look like. The whole structure appears to be built on a floating platform with storage for canoes on the main level and stairs from the veranda on the second level leading down to a dock. Quite a grand concept. How this would work in practice, given variable water levels and winter ice, is something of a mystery. This is the text that goes with the image on the previous slide. 200 shares in the project were available at $100 each. The aquatic club was to house a canoe and boat club, fish and game club, country club, tennis club, and a golf club. Each club would pay an annual rent to use the facility. When this ad was first placed on March 14, 1910, there were 10 lakefront lots available, so it appears that by the time this 14th of April 1910 ad appeared, 4 had been sold in the previous month, and by November of that year, 5 remained unsold. In January 1910, this advertisement for a subdivision on the land McCullough owned with his partners appeared in a local paper. The official plan, featuring more lots, wasn't actually registered at land titles until January of the following year. The text pointed out that the cost of living in Calgary was rising, making Chestermere an appealing alternative. Some quotes pulled from the ad copy. Calgary is to have its swell suburb in Chestermere. There is already a motorboat and 5 canoes running on the lake, and the next few months will see over 100 more added. There will be about 50 cottages built at the lake the coming summer. One can raise potatoes enough in one season to pay the cost of their lot. And interestingly, an electric railway is sure to be built inside of 18 months. That would put it in the early summer of 1911. There is also mention of Canadian Northern Railway building a station at Chestermere that summer. It was eventually constructed in 1913 at the south end of the lake. According to a later ad for this property, lakefront lots were priced at $300 each, and those back from the shoreline from $100 up to $200 apiece. The lot size was 50 feet by 150 feet. In December 1910, McCullough and his partners were successful in gaining the approval of the provincial legislature for an electric streetcar line to Chestermere. The new company was called Chestermere and Calgary Suburban Railway Company. Well before the Chestermere line had received government approval, promoters of other East Side developments were touting their proximity to streetcar service. This is just a sampling of the many ads that appeared in 1910. Each one mentions being on the proposed line as a selling feature. This illustration, part of a full-page ad promoting lot sales in Greater Habalta, is a favorite of mine. The accompanying text advises people to buy lots right now, as next month will be too late. They can make money while they sleep. Only 15 choice lots left at $100 each, but the price will be rising to $125 next month and guaranteed to increase to $150 in the near future. The early shareholders of the company were people whose property had frontage along the line, primarily farmers. At a meeting in May 1911, promises of $175,000 in share purchases and rights of way were made. A further meeting in August elected J. McCullough as president and general manager. It was reported that plans had been submitted for approval, a foreman had been hired, and a prediction made that the railway would open in the fall. However, matters bogged down later over Chestermere's desire to run their cars over the city's track. Calgary countered with a proposal to have the suburban company build the portion of track and bridge inside the city limits necessary to connect to the end of their line near Cushing's factory. In addition, once the cars entered Calgary, a conductor employed by the city but paid by the Chestermere company would board and collect an additional fare from passengers. On a more positive note, McCullough's real estate firm made a $40,000 sale of land along the Streetcar line. In turn, they purchased a quarter section for the Calgary-Chestermere Townsite Company, of which McCullough was president, with the intention of creating a subdivision named Belvedere. Plans for the development were filed in early 1912. As many will know, Belvedere is currently being built out adjacent to East Hills Mall. However, it's located on property about a mile southwest of the land purchased in 1911. The city limits of Calgary was at the 5th meridian, basically today's Barlow Trail. The Chestermere-Calgary Suburban's track was to commence just west of Cushing Bridge, head east along 17th Avenue, turn and go north up 36th Street, make a jog east and then north, and then continue directly east along what is now Memorial Drive, until it reached the west side of Chestermere. The dotted red line here shows a later alteration to the line, eliminating the jog. There was another group, a rival group, also planning a line to Chestermere. Their route is shown here in blue. It does overlap some with the Chestermere-Calgary Suburban's proposed route. The city officials wanted the two companies to arrange for one system between them, but it appears that the competing group bowed out entirely. Promotional material states that the railway company will be capitalized at $250,000 with shares for sale at $100 each, 10% down, and further calls of 10% made with 30 days notice. Only $30,000 is left to raise, as the balance has been subscribed by local people. Here's some hype from the text. Imagine the thousands that will patronize this pleasure resort and the swellest residential suburb of Calgary. I predict that the stock in this railway will be double its par value within 3 years. Note that the line will be open for freight and passenger service on or before May 1st, 1912. Garden produce and milk to be delivered to Calgary daily in fresh condition. Recall that in early 1910, the projected line opening was to be the summer of 1911, and now it's pushed back to spring 1912. On the left is the detail of the route as it approached the lake from the west and crossed the causeway, excerpted from the plan filed with land titles. On the right is an approximation of where the turns in the line would have been made in current-day Chestermere. Due to changes in both the shoreline and the route of 17th Avenue over time, this is not exact, but the turn south would have been made somewhere in the vicinity of John Peak Park, its parking lot, or the green space west of it. The map has been turned sideways to fit the slide, so north is now on the right. Here we have the streetcar route on the east side of the lake. After crossing the causeway, the line heads east on Chestermere Boulevard, turns south on what is now the property line between the old water slide and the Chestermere Public Works Yard, continues straight south for 2 miles, crossing East Merganser Drive halfway down. The route turns west into Kinneborough on a line that cuts through the new commercial plaza being built north of Alberta Health Services. The line turns north at a point that probably lies between today's East Chestermere Drive and East Lakeview Road. Then it continues up to Township Road 241A, where it turns back east to close the loop. This slide has been included to show the plethora of conventional railways and streetcar lines that were proposed for the area just east of Calgary. There are at least 5 streetcar lines: interurban, metropolitan, southeast, municipal, and the Chestermere line. And there appears to be 7 railway lines, including the Canadian Northern East Branch, North Branch, South Branch, the Grand Trunk Pacific North and South branches, and the CPR Main Line and North Line. Claims made in this ad include the pole line for the railway is complete, grading is over half done, 40,000 ties are being distributed along the line, and that opening of the line will take place 90 days after the rails are delivered. Construction on the Aquatic Club will begin May 1st, and 3,000 trees will be planted. Additionally, CPR has sold all their lakefront lots, and a total of 1,000 lot owners intend to build once transportation is completed. This figure of 1,000 is either a typo or a particularly audacious exaggeration. Here's a bird's eye view of the plan for McCullough's development by 1912. It now includes a 1-mile racecourse with grandstand and jockey club and a hotel near the Aquatic Club. The news item on the left states that a portion of the route has been altered, but no plan to that effect appears to have been filed with land titles. On the right, we have a notice of application by the company to increase the amount of their capitalization and bonding privileges, reduce the number of directors, and to extend line completion time by another 2 years. The request to increase capitalization to $750,000 from the original $250,000 seems to indicate that insufficient funds had been budgeted to complete the ambitious plans. Repeated delays may also have been a factor. The headlines on the left belong to a long article that outlines some of the issues plaguing the streetcar project and stalling its progress. You may not be surprised to hear that provincial red tape played a significant role. Chestermere also wanted the city to rent the old Calgary market to them for use as a terminal and farmers market. It doesn't seem that this issue was ever resolved. In March, the company received assent to extend the completion time of the line until March 1915, provided that at least 3 miles of line be put into operation before the end of 1913. Adding to these woes, a creditor of the Chestermere and Calgary Suburban Railway brought a court case alleging that the sale of some railway ties to the city of Calgary by the McCullough and McGillis partnership should be nullified, as the ties actually belonged to the railway company. In 1913, the value of city building permits issued suffered a drop of $11.5 million as against the year before. It was becoming clear that the great boom was going bust, as all booms inevitably do. Now it's 1914. The company applied for and received approval to yet again delay completion until 1916, but it was too late. Difficulties had been apparent for at least 18 months, but the advent of war in the summer of 1914 dealt the final blow to the dream of a Chestermere streetcar line. No further mention of the Chestermere and Calgary Suburban Railway Company appeared in local papers after 1914. But artifacts testifying to this endeavor persisted for years. A portion of the grade was actually constructed, and the elevations of the same could still be seen into the 1970s. Some of the poles that were placed became part of a farmer's fence. Was the streetcar line an idea 100 years ahead of its time? Transit service between Chestermere and Calgary was finally established on August 30th, 2021. So what became of J.A. McCullough? In 1915, his partnership with Alex McGillis folded, and he encountered some legal and financial problems. The family had always had a house in town and spent summers and holidays at the Chestermere farm. The original buildings near the lakeshore were destroyed by fire about 1919. They were rebuilt further east and became the home of the Holan family in 1927. J.A. continued to raise and train standard-bred harness horses on the Chestermere property and had considerable success. In 1917, his son Ernest and a partner founded Macklin Motors, the first auto dealership in Calgary, which is still operating as Macklin Ford. J.A. worked at Macklin for the last 10 years of his life before he died in 1945, age 79. Members of the McCullough family continue to hold a portion of the Chestermere property until at least the late 1990s. Sources for this presentation include Alberta Land Titles information, Calgary newspapers Albertan, Daily Herald, and Optimist, the Postcards from the Past collection from the Calgary Public Library, Saddled Sleighs and Satirons, the 1971 Chestermere Historical Society book, items from Library and Cultural Resources digital collections at the University of Calgary, Peel's Prairie Postcards at the University of Alberta Library's digital collection, the Provincial Archives of Alberta, and the book Frontier Calgary, 1875 to 1914, edited by Rasborich and Clausen and published in 1975 by the University of Calgary. Thank you for listening to this presentation. Please visit the Chestermere Historical Foundation website for more Chestermere historical content, or follow us on social media, on Facebook and on Twitter. Thank you.